Hey everyone, welcome to Logan's Mosh Pit. Glad to have you here. Today we're going to do another episode of the Memory Lane series, the place where we take a look back at some interesting articles and interviews from old guitar magazines. So my dad has been subscribed to Guitar World magazine for about 30 years now. He saved a bunch of old magazines. He was kind enough to let me borrow some. The one we're going to look at today is the December 1992 issue of Guitar World magazine. Here's what the cover looks like. I'm going to share an interview with you guys conducted by Grant Alden. He talked to Mark Arm and Steve Turner from Mudhoney, formerly of Green River. For those of you who are unaware, Mudhoney is a often overlooked forefather of the grunge movement. Grunge probably wouldn't have been possible without them. They influenced the big four. When you think of grunge, four major bands come to mind: Nirvana, Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, and Pearl Jam. All of those bands were influenced in some way by Mudhoney. They can thank them for that. 1992 was a huge year for grunge. It just kept building momentum. Nirvana was fresh off their blockbuster album Nevermind. Alice in Chains had just dropped Dirt in 1992. Soundgarden just released Bad Motorfinger the year before. And Pearl Jam was 1 year removed from their marvelous debut album 10. All those bands can trace back to Mudhoney. Kurt Cobain even said he was a huge fan of Mudhoney. So they never got the credit they deserve. So I'm going to share this article / interview with you guys. The first part starts out in article fashion, talking about the band's background. Then we'll get into the interview part. Here we go. If there truly is such a thing as grunge, and the word has far more to do with marketing than guitar sounds, bass lines, or flannel shirts, Mudhoney's Mark Arm and Steve Turner are probably responsible for it. Their 9-year partnership began with Green River, a post-punk Seattle band named after the dumping site of a serial killer. Alumni include Arm, vocals, Turner, who left after the first EP, guitarist Bruce Fairweather from Mother Love Bone and Love Battery, and Stone Gossard from Mother Love Bone and Pearl Jam, and bassist Jeff Ament from Mother Love Bone and Pearl Jam. When Green River dissolved on Halloween 1987, Arm and Turner, along with bassist Matt Lukin and drummer Dan Peters, casually formed Mudhoney. The next summer, their brown vinyl single, Touch Me, I'm Sick, appeared on a fledgling record label called Sub Pop, which Nirvana fans will be familiar with. It was, and is, a brilliant, crude, furious debut that sounded like nothing else. In the vernacular of the times, it rocked. Touch Me, I'm Sick was followed by an EP named after Turner and Arm's favorite effects boxes, Super Fuzz, Big Muff, the Mudhoney's LP in 1989, and last summer's Every Good Boy Deserves Fudge. Somewhere along the line, the British press got excited about Mudhoney. Then the American press got excited. Then Sub Pop nearly went out of business. Then former label mates Nirvana went platinum. Mudhoney's ongoing taste for the unexpected led to a deal with Reprise, for whom they recently recorded Piece of Cake. Before we go any further, I wanted to show you guys this awesome picture of the Mudhoney members. Hopefully you can see that. Okay, let's move on to the interview part. I'll let you know who answers each question. Here we go. Since you're partially responsible for it, how do you feel about the whole Seattle grunge phenomenon? Arm: I'm proud of my baby. Who would have thought that this whole thing would ever be foisted upon the entire world? As silly as it can be, It's great. You're going to get trashed in some places for having moved to a major label. Arm. We went to a major label as a matter of survival. Independent distribution collapsed. Turner. Sub Pop nearly collapsed. Arm. All of which was happening at the time Every Good Boy Deserves Fudge came out. Of all the things that major labels could do, at least they're going to pay you for the sales you have. How much hands-on control did Reprise have on Cake? Arm. None. Except for hands-on the money to us, thank you. Turner. There were no Warner's people anywhere near the studio. Our A&R guy came up because he was excited to see us record. He got here late, and everybody was already gone except me, so he got to see me do one acoustic guitar track on one song, Arm, and he came back the next day when I was doing vocals. You went from recording on 8 tracks on Every Good Boy Deserves Fudge to 16 tracks for Piece of Cake. What did you do with those extra tracks? Turner. Put a few more on the drums. Arm. We only had 3 channels for drums on Every Good Boy Deserves Fudge. This time we had 7. I don't know if they made them sound any better. Arm. It just made mixing more complicated. How much of that extra tracking went to guitars? Turner. Not much really. We still recorded pretty much the same way we always have. Some songs don't have any extra guitar overdubs, which is how we try to do it. Maybe punch in the solos so we could have a couple of tries at it. Make It Now probably uses more tracks than anything else. There's at least 4 guitar tracks there. Arm. Every time there's an organ on Every Good Boy Deserves Fudge, there's only 1 guitar because there was no room. You played those organ parts. You started on piano, right? Arm. That's the first instrument I ever learned. 8 years of piano lessons were thrust upon me in my childhood. When I got big enough, I said, no more, no more. I think forcing a kid to take music lessons really takes the fun out of it. What else did you do differently for this record? Turner. We spent a lot of money, for us, recording. We had plenty of time. We rented out the place for 6 weeks. Arm. We thought we'd just be able to get boom, boom, like we've always done, and then have all this time to make up songs. But no matter how much time you have, you take that exact amount of time. Turner. It went pretty easily, too. Arm. Yeah, we weren't going in there from 10 to 10 every day. Turner. Why bother to do that? Arm. That was kind of the point of the whole thing. We brought in our equipment, left it there, and went in for maybe 6 hours or less a day. You once said the secret of your sound is cheap gear. Is that still the case? Arm. I just bought my most expensive guitar, a $750 Gibson. How many guitars do you have now? Arm. 10. Turner. I don't know. I've got more than 10, but I've been buying them steadily for the past 8 years. How many do you actually play? Turner. Live from Mudhoney. I just use Mustangs. I have 2 of them now. The others I use a lot for recording, but they don't stay in tune as well. Some of the guitars I have cost $25. I got them just because I think they're cool. What did you play on this record? Turner. My Mustangs. A Hagstrom 3, which Mark also plays a lot, and a Hofner Galaxy. Oh, and a Silvertone acoustic. Arm. I played a Fender Mustang, a Fender Jaguar, a Hagstrom 3, which I used for slide, and for a couple of songs, a brand new Gibson that I got in the mail just in time to use. Turner. Actually, I also use that guitar. Arm. Yeah, a Gibson SG/Les Paul Custom, triple pickup Glenn Buxton thing. I've wanted one badly ever since I saw the cover of Alice Cooper's Love It to Death. Some of the rhythm parts were recorded through a Fender 135 Bassman, going through a weirdly folded 4x12 cabinet that's really much bigger than it needs to be. The other amp I used was a custom something or other that makes good spaceship sounds. I felt like John Fogerty, who used customs in his Creedence days, when I was playing it in the store, so I bought it. Can you use it live? Arm. I'm afraid to, because I think it's too fragile for traveling. So I guess my 2 most recent purchases were inspired by John Fogerty and Glenn Buxton, just from old album covers. They didn't have anything to do with how the things might actually sound. What about your amp, Steve? Turner, I have a Fender Twin reissue with only one volume knob. I've never been able to get a handle on 2 volume knobs, but we always have to use those on tour in Europe. They're far too confusing for me. The band may be big enough now for you to ship your own gear over instead of having to rent it. Arm, actually last time I brought my own amp over and rented the cabinet, and it sounded much better. We used to both rent Fender Twins in Europe, and we both had the same kind of guitar frequency. There wasn't enough variation in our sounds. Turner, I have a case for my amp, so I could send it no problem now. Arm, we all bought cases. Turner, yeah, that was our big purchase lately. The cases were more expensive than the amps and guitars we bought them for. I suspect that many of the people who read this will complain that they can play better than the 2 of you. Your styles don't have much to do with scales and arpeggio. Arm, I may be going off my nut here, but I think Steve is one of the most distinctive guitar players around today. There are certain technically correct ways of learning to play guitar, but Steve's unique because he doesn't know any of that. Turner, though I once had guitar lessons for 6 months, I learned from copying bad guitar players. Arm, I couldn't really play a lead if my wife... Gotta skip ahead here to 99. If my life depended on it, but I think I'm actually a pretty good rhythm player. I mean, I've become that. It took a while. When I was in the Thrown Ups, a side project, I was the drummer. That's a rhythm thing, I guess, so I could say that applies to rhythm guitar, even though I didn't know if it does or not. My foot taps. Turner, I'm getting better as a rhythm player. Arm, you're way more on now than you were. Way, way more on. Turner, that was a big problem with Green River too when I was in the band. I didn't have any rhythm. Arm, maybe that's what makes your solos neat. Turner, I usually lose my place 3/4 of the way through. When are you going to do a US tour in support of Piece of Cake? Turner, in November. It's not really worked out. We were going to be touring with Nirvana, but they canceled the tour. Arm, I was not looking forward to playing these really large arenas and not knowing what we're doing anyhow. When most bands start hitting that size arena, they tour in a bus with the crew and light technicians and stuff. We don't have any of that. We don't even know how to approach that kind of thing. That takes us to the end of the article/interview. Just goes to show you don't need expensive equipment to sound distinctive. It certainly worked for Mudhoney. I highly recommend you check out those albums they talk about. Every Good Boy Deserves Fudge and Piece of Cake. You won't regret it. So that does it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I really appreciate the support. I'll see you next time. Until then, rock on.